In Belgium, we find three major trade union confederations. The unionization rate is 52.8%. This translates into approximately 3.6 million union members, of which 50% are members of ACV, 41.7% of ABVV, and 8.3% of ACLVB. Almost every Belgian worker is covered by collective bargaining agreements. More than half of Belgian workers are members of a trade union. In companies, they are represented by union representatives who represent the life force of the union. They work daily for better wages and working conditions. In companies, social elections are held every 4 years for the Works Council and the Committee for Prevention and Protection at Work. 3/4 of employees then vote for their favorite representative. So you could say that the Belgian, in addition to being a bon vivant, is a union aficionado. In all phases of life, we as a union stand by our members. Through our comprehensive services and collective consultation, you as a student, job seeker, young parent, etc., can count on us. But how did these three confederations come about? Let's go back in time for a moment. At the end of the 19th century, workers managed to organize themselves more and more effectively, despite the coalition ban and harsh repression that prevailed at the time. The 1886 strikes were the catalyst for the creation of local, regional, and national unions in various industries. Workers also organized themselves through resistance funds, cooperatives, and mutual aid funds for sickness and unemployment. From the beginning, there has been a distinction between socialist, Christian, and social liberal trade unions, and the seeds of the Belgian social security system were sown here. Among workers in the textile and printing industries, we find the first union structures. Soon clerks also organized themselves, and this included sales staff in the first department stores. To this day, our union structures still partially take into account both worker status and sector. In 1898, the City Council of Ghent set up a study committee to draw up an unemployment insurance policy. The Ghent Unemployment Fund was established 2 years later. Henceforth, in addition to help from the union's welfare coffers, the unemployed received benefits. The so-called Ghent system is an arrangement whereby unemployment benefits are not paid to the job seeker by the government, but by a union. This unique system, according to a concept introduced by Louis Varlet, was to be emulated internationally. Another major point of contention was the reduction of working hours. In 1905, they took a big step forward by legislating Sunday as a day of rest. A law on industrial accidents was already in place in 1903. Unionization increased between World War I and World War II, the interwar period. With the rise of communism, mass strikes and legitimate demands by workers for more rights, the political balance of power changed. As a result, their rights grew exponentially. They achieved universal single voting rights, reduction of working hours, a minimum wage, paid leave, debate around social security, and the emergence of the index mechanism. Strikes are no longer illegal. During World War II, unions went underground and engaged in resistance. Together with future-oriented employers and officials, they prepared for reconstruction. This led to the creation of a first social pact at the end of World War II, which laid the foundation for our social security and social dialogue. In exchange for social harmony and regulation, the workers received recognition, and thus social progress was born. This was a very important milestone for the Belgian consultation model, with legislation on collective agreements, national advisory bodies for social interlocutors as a function of the socio-economic policy, sectoral joint committees, and so on. In short, a framework in which we as trade unions still work in Belgium. Since 1950, European countries have united economically and politically in the European coal and steel community to ensure lasting peace. Belgium is one of the founding countries. From then on, Belgian trade unions have also helped to develop more solid cooperation between trade union movements from these countries, harbingers of the subsequent European Trade Union Confederation. In 1950, elections for union representatives in consultative bodies took place on the shop floor for the first time. 15 years later, in 1965, the 5-day, 45-hour workweek was introduced in all industries. In 1966, a women's strike was held at FN Herstal and became an important symbol. More than 1/3 of the employees in this company were women. Their main demand was equal pay for equal work. As a result of this 12-week strike, unions began to pay more attention to women in the labour market and their specific demands.
Vive la lutte des travailleuses de la FN!
This resulted in the first intersectoral collective agreement on equal pay in 1975. The 1980s were also turbulent. Youth unemployment was rife. Trade unions already started dealing with youth work after World War II, but with this crisis, young people demanded their place even more than before. Together with unions, young people took to the streets during the legendary Youth Marches for Work. In the mid-1980s, the economy rebounded, but an economic recession soon followed in the early 1990s. This produced substantial savings with temporary de-indexation of wages, substantial tax increases, and privatizations. This also had consequences at the corporate level, with the low point being an announcement in the press of the bankruptcy of Renault.
De secretaris-generaal van Renault Frankrijk was naar Brussel gekomen. De voltallige pers was op een paar uur samengetrommeld.
Renault a décidé d'arrêter cette année la production de l'usine de Renault Industrie Belgique.
The social rules on collective dismissal had been completely ignored, and the case caused a great deal of commotion.
1000 Renault-werknemers, een derde van het personeel in Vilvoorde, begon vanochtend een betoging. Al snel kregen ze het waterkanon tegenover zich bij de Vlaamse regeringswijk, nadat aan de Friese ruiters wordt gemorreld.
This resulted in the Renault Law, which provides a stricter framework for information and consultation in case of collective dismissal.
Ik ben fier dat we die strijd gevoerd hebben, dat we die 6 maanden gevoerd hebben. Niet alleen voor ons, maar ook voor andere bedrijven. Nu denkt men 2 keer na als men zo'n fabriek wil sluiten.
Even in the years that followed, Belgium, as a small, open economy, remained highly dependent on the international context. A good collective bargaining system has made us one of the countries in Europe with the least inequality. Throughout history, Belgian trade unions have not only focused on worker mobilization, Belgium is also known for its system of social dialogue. This institutional system consists of negotiations at different levels between the social partners, resulting in the conclusion of collective agreements.
Vakbonden en werkgevers bereikten overeenstemming over de krachtlijnen van een interprofessioneel akkoord 2009-2010. Dat akkoord geldt voor de 2,5 miljoen werknemers uit de privésector en voor niet-actieven.
At the national and therefore interprofessional level, negotiations take place in the so-called Group of 10. This parity group is made up of the 10 key negotiators from the 3 unions and employer organizations. They engage in the social dialogue together. Within the Group of 10, the interprofessional agreement, the IPA, is being negotiated. This agreement is the basis for the collective bargaining within the sectors. It also covers 96% of all workers. In addition to agreements on wage trends, agreements are also made on employee training and education, working conditions and working hours, etc. The IPA outlines the framework with which the sectoral committees will then work and, if possible, reach better agreements. In these sectoral joint committees, unions and employers enjoy parity. They negotiate sectoral collective agreements and mediate in industrial disputes.
Je m'engage sur la liste du syndicat libéral pour défendre l'intérêt de tous mes collègues.
Je voudrais poser ma candidature pour les élections. De nature, je suis quelqu'un qui aime défendre les droits de mes collègues et améliorer la communication dans l'entreprise. Je suis toujours à l'écoute et présente et optimiste.
Social elections are held every 4 years in companies with at least 50 employees. All employees can participate by voting. In addition, they can run for office through one of these representative unions, each of which can submit a list. During these elections, votes are taken on the Works Council, an information and advisory body for economic and social affairs, and the Committee for Prevention and Protection at Work, where well-being and safety at work is on the agenda. In both bodies, there are equal seats for employer and union representatives. Young people can also sometimes be given separate mandates within these bodies. In addition, diversity in gender and ethnicity is encouraged. Employers often make it difficult for executives to apply. This remains a major challenge for unions. Never before have so many executives voted in the 2020 social elections, a great success.
Ik ben Annelies Beijers, 34 jaar en al meer dan 10 jaar afgevaardigde voor ACV Puls.
The union body, par excellence, is the trade union delegation. These representatives are appointed by the unions themselves, but are often members of one of the above bodies. They negotiate company collective agreements, intervene in individual problems, and call for action when necessary. The social dialogue, supported by mass mobilizations in Belgium, is unique. Look at what we have already accomplished in various sectors. The explosive growth of digitalization has very visible implications for the printing industry. In a shrinking market, the risk of a race to the bottom at the expense of employees is ever present. During the negotiation of the sectoral collective bargaining agreement for the period 2017 to 2018, the employers wanted to heavily reduce the night allowances already acquired by the employees. Their argument was that those surcharges were much higher in Belgium than in neighbouring countries, and that this weakened their competitive position. Through a collective approach and a 2-day strike action, this plan was able to be stopped, and the unions managed to obtain another wage increase of 0.8% on top of the index. In 1979, the 40-hour week threshold was crossed for department store workers. Through the new collective bargaining agreement, there was a collective reduction in working hours to 36 hours per week with pay. Unions also created a framework for flexibility in the industry, such as for late opening hours. They stopped night work and protected Sunday as a day of rest. These agreements did not come about by chance during a period of automation, a period that included the introduction of barcode scanners. In the financial sector, employment pressures have grown in recent decades due to increased digitalization. To ensure maximum employment retention, social partners are committed to lifelong learning with eLearn Plus. Through such organizations, everyone gets access to free training and premiums, even if you work in a small SME. In addition, they want to offer an incentive to discuss this topic in company meetings as well. Employees are continuously accessible through digital tools.
En groeien.
This complicates a good work-life balance. In the largest telecom player, Proximus, unions negotiated good agreements on the right to unavailability in 2017. This CLA provides a better balance and transparency. It also clarified the role of team leaders in this regard. Through technical solutions, the right to be unreachable was able to be practically transposed for absent employees. Behavioral change and acceptance is to be achieved through education and sensitization. In this sector, our union representatives proudly embrace the name white rage. This term was coined by journalists in the early 1980s when industry workers first sprang into action in their white work clothes. They came out on the streets demanding more staff and more pay even then, two themes that are still relevant today. The pressures of the COVID-19 crisis led to important collective agreements in these areas. An increase in the overall budget of the various sectors, wage increases for staff, additional jobs and better working conditions, and an additional 100 million for staff in the care of the elderly. Privatizations and downsizing have been putting pressure on the future of Flemish and Walloon public broadcasters for years. In Flanders, the Flemish government, led by the Flemish nationalists, recently increased the pressure on the public broadcaster VRT. In addition to savings, the VRT must strengthen the Flemish identity, as if Flanders were a nation in itself. With this, the conservative right want to get their grip on media and culture. Widely supported by VRT staff, unions shot into action. This happened in tandem with the broader socio-cultural field, which was also under attack. Together, they acted against censorship of culture, for example, by broadcasting their own program during strike days, against the cultural struggle that the Flemish government wants to wage, and for the independence of public broadcasting, a struggle that will continue to be necessary in the future. Private security and cleaning are sectors that offer their services through tenders at various work sites. These tenders are awarded again and again, all too often to the lowest bidder. This puts downward pressure on working conditions. Through the CLA site transfer, when we take over a site, we guarantee all employees keep their jobs under the same employment conditions. For the security sector, additional job and income security is guaranteed by a collective bargaining agreement on minimum monthly working hours. Although this can be flexibly negotiated via a system of increasing and decreasing hours, it does guarantee a fixed minimum income per month for employees. Recently, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, a collective bargaining agreement has been reached that provides every employee in the security and cleaning industry with insurance that will partially cover the paramedical costs in case an employee falls ill without having to be hospitalized. Sickness leads to poverty, but poverty also leads to sickness. We also want to continue to fight this through action and dialogue under the aegis of the unions. During the last year, citizens and companies have continued to call on the public services of bpost, the National Postal Service, and their employees have been ready to help. This reaffirmed bpost's social role, not only by unions but also among citizens. There is a strong call from unions for a level playing field for the various public and private actors in the sector in order to continue to guarantee public service and employment. At the negotiating table, progress is possible. This was demonstrated by the long collective bargaining process of 2019 with improvements on addressing workload, purchasing power, and job security. The corona pandemic will resonate with the hairdressing, beauty care, and fitness industry for a long time to come. The mandatory closure of these sectors hit many hard. During the shutdown, unions are pushing for minimal loss of income. In addition to the fixed unemployment benefit, workers receive an additional €10 per day of unemployment. For members, this happens automatically. In the platform economy, it is too early to speak of major achievements, but union work is not standing still there. Based on a complaint from a self-employed Uber driver, a key government commission ruled in late December 2020 that the driver was an employee and Uber an employer. After all, Uber imposes working conditions and rules on the driver. We see a similar story at Deliveroo. Through a legal battle, unions are taking steps forward with Deliveroo couriers to see them recognized as workers. The ruling is expected by the end of this year. These are small but nonetheless important steps forward in the debate over platform work. And even now, unions in Belgium are mobilizing workers to bolster their demands. The requirement for strong social security and good collective bargaining remains topical in a changing labour market where labour relations are under pressure. To be a union of the future, we are betting on young people. Collective dialogue is also constantly evolving to continue making a world of difference in the workplace.